Hello, everyone. I think just the title of this session may turn some folks off. We are talking about resilience, and we've all been asked to be so resilient over the last year. 2020 was a tough one for everyone, especially for this industry. We adjusted, we adapted, we were asked to be resilient and go in new directions. We went in new directions, we tried new things, and we continued to be resilient. And this conversation around resilience continues. And the question is, are we done yet? Are we there? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is no, we're not. Resilience is not a destination. But the good news is we are all stronger on the other side of this. We all learned a lot in 2020 that you may not even realize that you learned. Doing all the things that you did, learning to work in new ways, trying new things with your business, pivoting on how you're going to get revenue, all of those things created new strengths in us. What we're going to talk about for this session is what exactly those strengths are, what resilience is, and how to make sure that we use these new strengths, these new superpowers in the future, that we don't waste them because you work so hard for them, you should get something from it. We're going to start this discussion here in my hometown in Charleston, South Carolina. And my slide is not advancing, I apologize. We're going to begin in Charleston, South Carolina. Let me fix this real quick. There we go. At the Angel Oak. And the Angel Oak is this massive tree here in Charleston. It is 28 feet around, if you can envision that. 28 feet in circumference, and it's been in this field for more than 400 years. So with a tree that big, at some point, hundreds of years ago, that tree was full of all sorts, that field was full of all sorts of seeds. How did that one seed become this? How does that happen? How does one seed in a field of thousands of seeds become this and last 400 years? That is resilience. It bent its branches to find the right sunlight. It grew its roots in the right area to get to water. It adapted and changed to become this. But what was special about that seed? Was it a special seed? And then for people, how do people become the best in their field or the behemoth in their field? Think about Oprah Winfrey. Most of us know who Oprah is. And if you don't, I don't know what planet you've been living on, but on our planet, she's known globally. And Oprah was born into poverty. She was molested as a child. She had a baby at 14 and then lost the baby, sent to live with an uncle, somehow manages to get through college, gets her dream job in television, and then gets fired because she's too emotional. So how did Oprah become Oprah? Because we know what she did afterwards. Was there something special about her? Where did that resilience come from? What types of things did she do to make her that resilient? Well, the reality is how we handle adversity, how Oprah handled adversity, how everyone handled adversity. According to research, we can all be put into 4 different styles of handling adversity. And so we're going to start off today and figure out what you are. And I don't like to put labels on anyone, and I'm not asking you to put a label on yourself, but for the conversation today, let's figure out what style you handle adversity with. And so to do that, I'm going to set the scene similar to what they did when they presented this in Forbes magazine, but I'm going to twist it a little bit and we'll talk about the hotel hospitality industry and your world that has been so tough over the last year. So I'm going to tell you a story, paint a picture, and at the end of it, you're going to feel a certain way. I need you to hold on to that feeling. All right. So say you have been put in charge of working with a group and presenting to a big prospect client that's coming to look at your location for a perfect event, the right size of folks that are coming in, the right number of attendees. So maybe you're in a big location, it's got thousands of people. Maybe you're in a smaller boutique location, it's got just the right number of attendees for you. This is a great event, and it's food and bev, and you also have the opportunity to do AV, and you have all these other things that you can pile on. So it's a really big deal for you and your team. All right, so you're trying to win this customer, and the group that you're working with chooses you to present to this customer. And so you put together some great information and you sit in a room with them and you present to them, and you are getting all the things that you want from them. They are nodding, they're smiling, and you're getting good feedback. You've got great data visualization. You've done your homework. You know everything about them and their event and their industry and what their attendees would like. You know you've got this nailed. You really do a good job. And they are giving you all these cues. And at the end of the event, you say goodbye to them and you look at your team, maybe you're high-fiving and you're happy with how things went. And you go out and maybe have a cocktail and celebrate that you're pretty sure you got this one. Then the next day you walk into the office, into your location, and your manager, boss, whoever that might be, walks up to you and says, hey, the client went with someone else. Your presentation didn't hit the mark. In that moment, you felt something. Your manager says, hey, the client went with someone else. Your presentation didn't hit the mark. How did you feel in that moment? Again, back to our 4 buckets. Did you, 1, feel like, oh man, I let the team down. I must have missed something. Did you, 2, go back and replay every conversation and all the research you did and go, what did we miss? What did we miss? Did you, number 3, think, okay, they went with someone else. We need to fill those dates. We need to fill the venue. Let's find somebody else. We got to make our number, hit our quota. Or did you, 4, think, we were right. There's got to be something else going on. Did you go back and think, okay, maybe there was an acquisition or something bigger happening that we just didn't know about? So one of those 4 things, and I say I'm a little bit of 1 and sometimes a little bit of 4, but for the sake of this exercise and figuring out how we each handle adversity, pick 1. When your boss said, your presentation didn't hit the mark, what did you feel? All right, 1 of 4. So get it in your head. You got to pick 1. And let's look. So the first one, those are the empathizers, the ones that felt like I let the team down. I must have done something wrong. The number 2, those are your processors. These are the folks who are like replaying every conversation, going back and looking what information everybody else sent in and thinking, what did we do wrong? Number 3, these are the fixers. That one didn't work. Let's fill somebody in this space. Let's hit our numbers. Let's make our quota. Let's make sure we have a great someone in town for those days that are now open. And then the 4th are the analyzers. And these are the ones that are thinking, there's something bigger, strategy, something going on. Someone's in the middle of an acquisition. Like, it's not us. It had to be something else. All right. So one of those 4 is how you deal with adversity. And it's interesting to find out what the label might be, but more interesting is to look at how we look like as a workplace. So if you look at hundreds and thousands of people and how they fill out this survey, this is sort of what our workplaces look like. We have a lot of empathizers out there, and we have a lot of processors out there, and we need those. Workplaces need all of these people, but we have very few fixers. That 11%, there aren't very many fixers. And those folks are pretty key because they're moving forward. And then you have some folks who are the analyzers. And I think that there's a lot of those in management, and you need those people to go back and go, okay, what's the bigger picture? What are we not seeing? And have the big global view. But I want you to look at that 11% right now, because when they took that 11% and they overlaid that, the smallest percentage of people, with the rest of the information in this survey, that 11%, those people, they are the ones that had the highest job satisfaction. They had the happiness scores that were higher, and they felt like they were a success. So when they overlaid the other data from the same survey with that 11% scored higher and feeling like they were successful, being happy with their job. How come we can't be a little bit more like that? So we know it's not all going to be sunny days. We know storms are coming. Yet we spend a lot of time processing and analyzing and trying to figure out what went wrong instead of just going, oh, here comes another storm, managing through it and moving forward. What part of us could be a little bit more like a fixer so we could do better at moving forward quickly when things go wrong? Because again, we're going to have stormy days. That's just the way the world is. Here's what I see. I call them, all these types of adversity are thises. And there's all sorts of thises that hit us every day. This is the adversity. There's little adversity. This is lowercase THIS. These are things you just get up in the morning and you have your day planned, but maybe you spill your coffee on your outfit and have to change, or you hit traffic on your way in, or maybe your kid's school calls in the middle of your big meeting. They're just things that weren't planned in your day that you have to deal with to keep moving forward. Those are the little thises. And then there are the bigger thises, the capital THIS. And these are things that may sidetrack you for more than just a few minutes or an hour. These could sidetrack you for days or weeks or even months. This could be losing that really big client. That's a big this. or getting injured. Maybe you break your leg at the busiest part of your season and you have to hobble around and figure out how to get around with a cast on. Or maybe you get sick and you're sick for a few weeks and you get behind on things. Those are all big thises that will take your plans and you'll have to work through them and you'll take your plans in a new direction for a little bit, but you're back on track. And then there's the big thises, the capital T, capital H, capital I, capital S's, the big thises. Those are the things that sidetrack your plans, sidetrack your story, sidetrack your life, and they take you in a whole new direction. The big thises, those are the adversities that are large and take your story and maybe your organization and your whole world in a new direction. Well, I am here to tell you COVID was a big this for all of us. We all had to make changes. Nobody woke up on January 1st of 2020 and said, my goal this year is to survive a pandemic. We had plans, we had all sorts of exciting things lined up, and those things went away. COVID was a big this for all of us. It is a huge adversity. So when we deal with a big adversity or a big this, we actually go through the stages of grief. And here's why this is important. And think about your last year. Think about the last year. You did all of these, I'm guessing. So at first, when we got, when they started telling us we couldn't do things and shutting down airlines or making people make changes, there was this denial, like, it's not going to hit me. It's not going to hit my organization. We're going to figure out something. We were in this denial for a little bit. And then events started canceling. Flights started canceling. The world started changing. There was this anger, like, you're kidding me. They're canceling this big event that I worked so hard to get here. The world is changing really fast. So there's anger around, I can't do what I had planned. So you went through the anger phase of grief. And then we all went through the bargaining phase. Do you remember the bargaining phase? If we just wear this mask for a few weeks and we all behave, we can get back to our lives. So we all did a little bit of bargaining. And then the depression piece. And if you are one of the rare people who got through the last year without ever getting depressed, more power to you. But most of us went through days, even me, who's pretty optimistic, went through days where there was some type of depression where I was just not dealing with the fact that the whole world had changed. And some of us started off really optimistic. I started off working out and doing a lot of great things, doing a bunch of research with the extra time. And then it kept going and going. And then I got to the depression piece where I would just binge watch a little Netflix and drink wine and go, let's get out of this. So we all bounced around for this. Maybe you were furloughed and then fired. So maybe you were angry for being furloughed, and then you went back up to anger again when you lost your job or your company went under. We don't stay in the same place with the pieces of grief and the stages of grief. We bounce around in them. But the most important stage is this last one I haven't talked about yet, this acceptance. And when we look back over the last year at the companies and the individuals who have done the best, they're the ones who got to the acceptance first. The ones who bounced around in those and got to acceptance, made a change, went in a new direction, and created new success. That is really important. Now, what's the key to getting to that acceptance piece? How do we get there? A little bit more like the fixers. How quickly can we get to the acceptance and move forward? How do we know how to do that as if we haven't been through a lot of adversity? Or who can we ask for the answer to this? Well, this is where I need to share with you my story. So I'm not sharing this to brag, but this is helping me set the stage for why we know what the key is, because we need to talk to someone who's had some great success and someone who's had some really big misses. And that'd be me, one of the many people who have, but I will share mine to make this point, to share this analogy. So I was early on in my life an elite athlete. I was a member of the US gymnastics team, and then I competed for one of the top college programs in the United States. And then I went on and got into television, and I was a investigative journalist, won a lot of awards as an investigative journalist. And then I was a popular news anchor. And then I won an Emmy for the best news anchor in the Southeast. Great success in television. And then I jumped from TV to tech, and I got into a software company. And I jumped in at about 200 people, the startup. And I was part of the leadership team for 10 years. And we took that company at about 1,200 people, and we took it public. And I was the vice president of marketing during the company's IPO. When we flew up to New York and we rang the bell at NASDAQ, I was the head of the marketing team. And Forbes magazine said it was one of the top tech IPOs of the year. So great success. the success comes with some big thises. So this is how I got into talking to you today. I was on the US gymnastics team and went all over the world, Japan, Hungary, Germany, Australia. But the year of the Olympics, I didn't make the Olympic team. And I felt like my life was over, that I'd wasted my time, that this was, just I was embarrassed and I was humiliated because I put my whole life into it and I didn't make it. And then I went to college and competed, got myself going again, and then I blew out my knee. So I ended up, that's me on a mat after a beam dismount with the paramedics and my coach around me. And I ended up losing my sport. I could not compete. That was the last dismount I ever did. And I couldn't compete any longer. And so once again, I was in this point where it was big this, took my life in a new direction, wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. Found myself loving television, got in there, loved what I did, won a lot of awards. And then one day I get called in as a news anchor. I get called into the boss's office and he says, "Hey, we're releasing you without cause." And then a nationwide budget cut. They had looked at, we've done this, some of us, we force ranked people. I didn't know at the time, but it was force ranked and I made a certain number and they just let people go. So I was let go. And it felt very personal at the time. Another big this had to go in a new direction. I got back into television and had some more success. And then I was involved in this really horrific accident that we'll talk about a little bit later. But the biggest this in my life that gave me a very different perspective on all this. And after that, I went and got into tech. And so when I got into tech, having gone through those thises, I had some huge success, partly because I had this weird superpower. I just had this strength that I didn't know I had. So with this and in tech, I became this person that people would go to and they'd say, "What's the key to that? How do you reinvent yourself? How do you jump to something new and then find even more success on the other side? What's the key?" Well, I thought I had the answer to that. And I would tell stories and I would share some of the things I'd been through, or I would maybe talk about stoicism or cognitive behavior or mental toughness and different things. But I really didn't have a good answer for what the key is. And that has led me to here with you today. I left corporate, and for the last few years, I've been researching and talking with individuals and companies, heads of companies and industry organizations about what makes people resilient. And I've gone down this path and what makes people have success on the other side of any type of failure or any type of fall. And the word I got to is resilience. And I got to this word before the pandemic, but think about this. In the last year, we all watch TV, no matter where you are in the globe, this word kept coming up and came up in different languages. This word resilience. And it's one we probably hadn't used nearly as much as we did over the last year during the pandemic. And the reason is there's plenty of speakers out there that talk on grit and persistence and these other key phrases. But in 2020, you couldn't just double down or go harder, put everything into it. You couldn't do grit and persistence. You had to adjust. And so this is the definition of resilience from the center of resilience. And the part of it that's so important is this adapt, the way we, after adversity, adapt in a positive way. So it's this adapt and adjust piece that is really key. And that is what we can all do more of. Here's how I look at it. It's how we handle the thises, the everyday little thises, that spilled coffee, and the really big thises like the pandemic. How we handle the thises is directly related with your success in the future. So let's make sure we handle them well. And what I put together is a toolkit for you to do that. You all have done a lot of thises. Last year, you had thises of every size. You were already stronger. My son would say, "You're looking pretty swole." You're already stronger and you have built this strength. Let's make sure we use it and don't just take it for granted that it's there or not understand what it is that we now have the ability to do. So we're going to look at how we use these thises. And to make it really simple, I put a fun acronym on it, and we're going to say we're going to keep our cool. COOL. And those letters, I'll unpack them in a moment, stand for put things in context, take ownership, pull in others, and assign language. So let's start with that first one. Let's start with the context. This is interesting. In the context of the big picture of your life, where does this fit in? Little this, big this, or the pandemic this? How do you see it as in the big picture of your life? And if you don't listen to anything else I do in this session, listen to this one part because this is my favorite and it's really interesting to me, and I think it'll be interesting to you too. Remember when you were 10 years old and the days seemed like they went on forever? Like summers when you were 10, you had all this time out in front of you. It was so much fun. And the days just stretched on and summer seemed like this long time. And then when you're 40 and you're at summer, maybe some of you are parents right now and you're 40 and have a 10-year-old, that summer goes by like that. Wow, time just flies. Why is that? What's going on there? Well, when you're 10 years old, that year of your life is 1/10 of everything you know. That year, 365 days is 1/10 of everything you know. And when you're 40, that 1 year of your life is 1/40th of everything you know. Same 365 days, but the context of where it fits in is very different. The math works in strange ways. 1/10, 1/40th, same 365 days. So let's look at your life. And I did mine on a timeline, but I really suggest you do this as well. Put where you are, put your life down on a timeline. And for me, I put the resume stuff, the big chapters of my life above the line. And then down below, I put down the big thises in my life, things that took me in a new direction. Now, you could also put in places you've lived, relationships, all of that into your timeline. But for me, this is what my timeline looks like. And I threw in parenting kids because I had kids at home from 30 to 50, and I'm in my 50s now. So I sort of just let it go off in the future. This is what my life looks like. You would do the same thing. But look at the math here. When I was a gymnast and I lost my sport right before I turned 20, that was 75% of everything I knew in my life. Of course, it felt like my life was ending. Of course, it felt like it was huge because it was everything I knew about life at that point. But now in my 50s with kids home and parenting, it's that gymnastics piece is only 28% of my life. And the time parenting kids is more. So I put this in front of you so you can think about the big things that happen in your life and where you are. Maybe you're much younger. If you're in college right now, those 4 years at university, they seem like the most important thing in the whole world. And when things go wrong, like it really rocks your world. But in the big picture of your life, they look different. And for me, this is my favorite part of this. Here's my whole life. If I live to be 100, which I need to take better care of myself and maybe drink less wine. But if I live to be 100, I can look at my timeline and think, these are things all are part of my story. They're all things that I've done in my life. And then I had this COVID right here. It was a sidetrack. It sidetracked all of us. It hit me too. It hit you. You would put COVID in your timeline, wherever it is for you. And the best part about this timeline is that book at the bottom. All the rest of the timeline is blank. So this is a moment that we're in. And last year sucked in a lot of ways. And last year was tough. But all of this stuff out ahead is blank. And we're going to decide what to put there. And that brings us to the O of ownership. Where does this fit in your story of your life? What do you own? What's going to be the story? So do this with me for a moment. Wherever you are, just shut your eyes, or you don't have to shut your eyes. Think about, what does the book of your life look like? If it was a book and the end of your life, it's a book. What color is the cover? Is it a hardback? Is it a softback? Is it maybe a children's book and it has illustrations? Or maybe it's a comic book. Some of you could be really quirky. Maybe you have a really fun comic book that is the story of your life. So what does that book look like? Okay, got it in your head? What color's the cover? Okay, now open that book to today. You're on a page in that book today. We're all having this weird crossover moment because we're all in the same place in our books. We're having a conversation right now. So what does that look like? You're on a page. Right now in your book, everything you've done is filling the pages right up till then. But today, this page, everything going forward is blank. All those pages are blank, and you're going to decide what to put there. You have more control over what goes into the story of your life than anybody else. Not your spouse or your parents, not anyone else, not your boss. You'll decide what goes into the pages of your life. And we'll talk more about that as we unpack some of this. The key to the pages of your life is that acceptance piece. And there was a you before this pandemic, and there's going to be a you after. Your life was going in a direction. We all were. We were tumbling those blocks. And then boom, this thing hit, and we had a moment of pause. None of that's, the rest of those blocks have fallen. We will decide what actions, what locations, what people go into the future of our story. What goes into that book going forward? Maybe there's people that better not, that would you be better off not being around. Maybe there's something that you do or you wish you'd like to get rid of and not put in the rest of the book. Or maybe there's something that you wish you could put in the rest of your book. Think about those things as we think about the before and the after of a pandemic, because what comes with a big this is license to change. People are not going to look at each other strange on the other side of this pandemic. If people switch careers, there's a lot of marriages that fell apart. There's a lot of big changes going on for people all over the globe, because we all had this moment, this big this in our life. And you have it too. And it's an opportunity for you to decide what goes into the book ahead, into all those blank pages. And now let's talk about others. This is really key, because when we looked at who got through the pandemic well, the companies and the individuals who weathered the storms and did okay, some of them actually had great success during the pandemic. In this industry, very difficult to have great success during a pandemic where no one can come visit you. But there are people who did better than others. And the ones who did the best are the ones that pulled in others, that didn't try to do this on their own. Think about it. There were masterminds that popped up all over. CEOs were calling other CEOs to chat. Clubhouse got really big. If you haven't done Clubhouse yet, that's a good place to find others. People started looking to others on social media and other places so they could pull them in and get through this together. The ones who did that had more success. And here's why. When something big happens and we get into an adversity, into a big this, we're in this new uncharted territory. Pandemic, big uncharted territory. And it's like being in a maze. And sometimes you need somebody else who can see above the maze or may see it differently than you to go, hey, you're headed for a dead end, or there's a shorter route over there, or they've just seen it differently. Having other people, when something big happens, some adversity, having other people go through and think it through with you is key to success when a big this happens, when something happens that takes you off course. And I'm going to prove this to you. So if you're not near your computer, say you went to the bathroom, those of you away from your computer, come back and look at the computer, because we need to all look at this at the same time. And this is more fun to do in a big room, but you'll get the picture. I'm going to show you something here, and we're all going to see it at the same time. You ready? 3, 2, 1. What'd you see? If we were in a big room, I'd have you raise your hand. Some of you saw a tree first, and some of you saw two faces. Now, the people who saw a tree first are creative, and the people who saw the two faces are good at dealing with other people's conflicts. So there's a lot more to this, but for the sake of this, why this is important in our discussion here is we all saw the same image at exactly the same time, but we didn't see the same thing. This is what you need to keep aware of as you go through adversity. These are what people who deal with adversity do well, is they have an understanding that they don't know what they don't know, and they pull in other people. Other people have different life experiences and see things differently. And that is why you need others as part of your toolkit to deal with adversity. And then the final one is language. Language, what are you going to call it? And we heard a lot of this during the pandemic. There was the whole, are you stuck at home or are you safe at home? That was part of the language people were assigning. And in your life, in your company, in your industry, things have changed, things have happened, everything's transformed. What is the language you will use going forward? And what is the language you will use when things go wrong again? So it won't always be perfect. Things are going to happen. That's just life. What is the language you will assign to it? And here's a way to think about it. What do you think this young mom is saying to this young girl? Let's go back to our example for when we put ourselves in buckets. Do you think she's saying, well, mommy is mad because she blew a big meeting and she's not very, she's an idiot and her team didn't do its part and Bob didn't turn in the right stuff and everybody screwed up and we lost a big deal and I'm probably going to get fired and probably have to cancel Christmas. Do you think that's what she's saying? No. I have a feeling in this sweet little girl's, as she sits there with this sweet little girl, she is saying something like, well, mommy's just a little grumpy because things were tough at work today. And we have a big challenge and we got smart people. Mommy's smart. She's got smart people she works with and we're going to figure it out. It's not like we're going to have to cancel Christmas or anything. That's more likely what she is saying. We need to speak to ourselves like children and use language that we would use to be kinder when we're in a big this. It just makes sense. it just makes a difference. It makes all of the difference because you start the echo. So what is in your head comes out of your mouth and it becomes your story. What you think, you say, and it becomes your story. Here's a scenario some of you can probably relate to. You step into a big meeting and you feel like everybody's done their job, and you come out and you have this conversation and it just goes south. The boss is really ticked off. Things don't go well. Everybody's pointing fingers back to Bob not doing his part, and so pulled the wrong numbers and we totally screwed this up. Well, you walk out of that meeting and you're walking down the hall with a group of people and you're saying, well, that was devastating and we are ruined and Bob's totally an idiot and should have done this part and we're never going to get out of this. This is a disaster. As you walk out of that room. Now, people around you may see your body language and you walking down the hall. And maybe there's a young intern and a young person that's on the side there and they hear you walk down the hall. And then later that night you go and you're having dinner with maybe your wife or your husband or your spouse and you're out somewhere grabbing a bite. And that young couple, the young intern, goes walking through the restaurant and goes near you and they say to their friend, oh, saw them today. They totally had, disaster happen and they're totally screwed up and it's really bad and everybody's freaking out about it and they're pointing fingers at each other. And that's the kind, and then he goes and has his seat. Same scenario. You leave that same discussion in the room. You leave and you walking down that hall and you say, well, didn't see that coming. That's a challenge. Didn't go like we thought. We need to pull together some really smart people and fix this. This is going to be tough. We got this. Come on, who can we get? And you're walking down the hall. That's the fixer piece. That's the solutioning piece. That's the language that was in your head that comes out of your mouth and you're walking down the hall and this same young person, young intern hears it. And then they pass you that evening and they're with their friends and they say, wow, they have some new challenge at the office and they're putting together a team of some of the smartest people. I really hope they pick me. It's the same scenario. Same thing happened. The language you use is really key when things go wrong. And as we look at the big thises and the adversity and the year behind us, we still have many opportunities to get it right going forward. So keep this in mind as things go wrong. If you were a leader, or if you are just a parent, or not just a parent, or if you're a parent, the things that you're in your head come out of your mouth and become your story. So those are the big superpowers. Those are how we keep it cool. We put things in context. We take some ownership. We pull in others and we assign the right language. That is how we get through adversity, how we get to acceptance quickly and we move forward and we have success in the future. Now, I could just end here, but this is really key for me to share at this moment. I left out at the beginning of this, the story that has me really knowing that this is true and that this works. So it's always a difficult story to tell, even here virtually, but I'm going to share it now because it's important. So I was a popular news anchor, using that word, and I took an afternoon off to go meet my kid's school bus. And I went and got to the school bus, and the school bus actually dropped off at my co-anchor at his house, and his wife was there, and I got there a little early and we're playing in the yard with their baby and lots of moms come, and it was a fun, crowded, beautiful afternoon, and the bus comes around the corner and you could hear the kids even before the bus got there, and it opens up and the kids all pile out and everybody's happy. And then we all visit for a minute more, and then I gather up my kids and all the other moms gather up their kids and we jump in our cars or we walk back to go where we're going. And I had driven because I was going to go run some errands. I'm like, come on, we got to go. Kids get in the car, we buckle everybody in and I go to leave. Well, in the hustle and bustle and lots of kids in the crowded space, no one had noticed that my dear friend and co-anchor's wife, that their baby had crawled next to the tire of my car. And I backed up. So in that moment, I went from world-class athlete and popular news anchor to the lady who ran over her best friend's baby. Now, I'll get you out of this really uncomfortable moment here very quickly. He lived miraculously. His face and his skull were crushed, but lots of surgeries and lots of prayer and lots of years later, he's 17 now and he's a healthy, happy high school kid, and he lived. But in the years that followed, the months that followed, or even the days that followed, it was a very tough path. And I used these skills. I had to go through and do all of these pieces. And it wasn't until I really started digging into what makes success and how I went from there to ringing the bell in NASDAQ and having huge success did I realize I built these superpowers. And let me show you how that is. We'll start at the bottom. We assigned language. So we called it an accident. We got through it together. And we talked about he's healing and he's on his path to recovery. And we pulled in others. We worked with each other to get through it. We had good therapists. We relied on family and friends, and others helped us. The whole community held prayer vigils. It was a big part of what the community went through together. Lots of others in that. And we took ownership. We looked at the big story of our life, the story of my life. I didn't want that to be my whole story. I didn't want that to be on the cover. I wanted to be a full life story, and I wanted to figure out where that fit in. So that became a path for me. I went back on the air with my co-anchor for a year. We sat there side by side with each other to make sure that our stories became a story that we could tell and we were proud of and confident with. And so as he healed and we went on the air together, our story unfolded. And then context. When I look at my timeline, that is just part of the big, long timeline that is my life. There were very dark days after that, and I almost ended my timeline there. And that is why I share the story, because even if something really big happens, a big this, as horrible as that was, or maybe you lost your job, or maybe your company went under and you're just trying to dig out of this. We heard so many people yesterday in all of the sessions talk about all the adjusting and the changing and furloughing and the things that had to happen in this industry. Even if it really was horrible, this isn't your whole story. What is your story? What is going to be your story in the future? What is that going to look like? You are going to decide. This pandemic is going to be a piece of it. It's going to be a crappy chapter for a lot of people. And on the other side of it, it's going to be different. 5 years from now, when you are, hopefully we're all back out and about and we're grabbing a beer and eating some pizza. 5 years from now, when we all get together with our friends again, we're going to be telling stories about how you got through the pandemic of 2020. It's going to be a story that you tell. It is not going to feel like it does right now. It's going to be a story that you tell. Similar to when we all have our 9/11 story, especially here in America. If you have a 9/11 story, we know where we were when that happened. And sometimes the conversation will go to that and everyone will tell their story of where they were and how that went. Well, this is global. Everyone's going to have a pandemic 2020 story. And your story is uniquely yours. What is that story going to be? How are you going to tell that story? You have an opportunity still to make it a story that you're proud of. And that's my challenge to you today. Today, in the book of your life, you're on a page. So today, when something happens, a this or a bigger this, or maybe a big this, and unfortunately the big this is still are coming. This won't be our last one because that's life. But when something happens in your life that is not planned, maybe it's just spilling coffee or traffic, or maybe it's bigger, just know, keep your cool. Keep your cool. Remember that acronym, put it in context, take ownership, pull in others, and use language. And think about where it fits into the book of your life. Those little thises that can take so much energy from where we want to go and can take so much out of our day, those little thises, they don't even make it into the book. How we handle the thises is directly related to your level of success. How you handle the little ones and the big ones will be directly related to your level of success and achievement in the future. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.